Great. Thanks, Adam. Welcome, everyone. And thanks for attending this third digital twin panel discussion entitled Collaboration is Key. My name is Seth Taylor, and I'll be moderating today's session. Full disclosure, I'm calling in from California where it's just after 4 a.m. So apologies if you see me hitting the coffee vigorously. Today's topic is a bit of a catch-all. We'll be touching on a number of sessions that pertain to how DIMMs are developed, deployed, and maintained by energy companies, and trying to focus on different elements of collaboration and partnership in a technology space that is rapidly evolving. Anyone working in the digital twin space currently can appreciate the challenges that come with trying to remain collaborative, flexible, nimble, secure, agile, and dare I say profitable in an ever-changing landscape of data types, vendor capabilities, and customer needs. As a product owner for digital twin solutions at Chevron, I know this is a topic that has consumed many hours in our internal efforts to develop an enterprise digital twin strategy. So I'm excited to host this session, shed some light on the topic, and hopefully help others who are asking similar questions in their own digital twin journeys. I'm joined today by 4 outstanding panelists who bring broad domain expertise and deep energy experience to our discussion. We have Justin Piwetz from BP, Alan Bibb from Neptune Energy, Wassim Ghadban from Kent PLC, and Shannon Katcher from GTI Energy. Welcome to you all, and thanks for spending some time with us today. Before we get started, let me just remind audience members that we welcome your questions and comments. If you post questions to the event chat thread, I'll do my best to surface them to the panel sometime over the next hour. I'd like to first start by giving the panelists a minute to introduce themselves. I think the respective roles and affiliations are important to understanding the perspectives they'll share with us today. Also, I can only use the word distinguished so many times before it starts to become repetitive. So Shannon, let's start with you. Maybe you could tell us briefly about your role at GTI Energy and your experience with digital twin.
Thanks so much, Seth. And I'm really honored to be speaking here today with this really remarkable set of panelists. So thanks for having me. My name is Shannon Katcher. I'm Executive Director of Digitalisation and Data for GTI. GTI is a nonprofit research organization focused on solving challenges in the energy industry. And my role particularly is to implement digital solutions for our research programs and our customers to enable reliable, scalable, and interoperable solutions. I particularly focus on the role of digital solutions for enabling energy transitions, which I know is a hot topic these days. And in terms of digital twin applications, our work across the energy supply chain has really exposed some interesting applications from integrated systems that help to reduce methane emissions to optimizing gasification processes, to pinpointing hydrogen leaks, to implementing efficient and predictive pipeline replacement programs. I've seen a lot of unique implementations and also just frankly definitions of what a digital twin is, as I'm sure you all have. But I've especially learned a lot along the way. So thanks again for having me, and I'm going to chat with everyone today.
Thanks, Shannon. Alan, care to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Alan Bibb. I work for Neptune Energy. We're an upstream independent oil and gas company, and we aim to be carbon negative by the end of 2030. Our operated assets include flagship hubs in the UK and Norway, and we have an extensive brownfield portfolio in both Germany and Netherlands as well. So we have a wide range of different environments in which we deploy our digital twins. And in Netherlands particularly, we're doing a lot of transition now towards carbon storage and hydrogen and things like that. My role is within IT. I lead digital asset. It's a global role, and part of it is the delivery of our digital twin solutions. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Justin, how about you?
Sure. Thank you, Seth. So I work at BP. As you can imagine, BP is a large company with quite a large portfolio of different types of twin deliveries. I'm the service portfolio owner across the Geospatial, digital twin, and IoT portfolios. In that area, we are helping the transition to net zero by 2050, and we are setting up digital twins across assets from wind farms to EV charging stations to our greenfield and brownfield operations, onshore, offshore. So what we've focused on, rather than delivering a single solution for a single asset, platform that we can deliver rapid digital twin growth and delivery across a vast array of different types of use cases, essentially.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Wassim, could we trouble you for a brief introduction, please?
Hello all, this is Wassim Ghadban. I'm the Global Vice President for Innovation and Digital Engineering at Kent. At Kent, we design, build, and operate the assets that power today and make it future ready for tomorrow. From digital perspective, we are pioneers. We help our clients to really design and implement digital twin solutions for project execution and for operations as well. We work closely with owner operators and EPCs who's not having this type of expertise in-house to bring the efficiency in their operations and the construction of new projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Wassim. So I love this mix of people and roles and companies represented on this panel. So well done, Adam, and let's get into it. Let me ask the first question to the panel. So we all appreciate that collaboration and strategic partnerships are to success with digital twin. If you choose to do it, build yourself. Company themselves to partner effectively in developing, deploying, and/or maintaining digital twins. What elements and strategies are key enablers here? Wassim, maybe we can start with you on this particular question.
Well, talking about collaboration, right? For us, we know and we are sure that to develop like innovative solutions in energy sector, you need to maintain collaboration between different parties. There is no one single company that can do it alone. For us, we are working with innovation centers, we are working with technology suppliers, we established many partnerships and MU. We are working with owner operators, we are working also with peers in the industry to create standards and to create also collaboration on the best expertise that we can get from each party. So for instance, for us, we noticed that, okay, we will keep the development of digital twin platform really with technology suppliers. They are really good in this. And since we have like expertise in the industry itself on the processes and the design, construction, and operations, so we believe we are in better position really to use their technologies, but to customize it and implement it properly for the needs of our owners, owner operators. So collaboration is definitely key, but also we need to make sure that we define the standards for this collaboration to be able really to retrieve the data from different platforms, to be able also to define the requirement from the stakeholders that's going to be engaged in this journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Wassim. You touched on a key topic there regarding partnership and collaboration, which is starting to get into the need for standards and how you perhaps communicate some of the needs to those partners. I'm wondering if any other panelists on the committee today can maybe follow up on that thread a little bit.
Yeah, Seth, I'd love to follow up on that. And I think Wassim, you made a good point. We require standards because for many reasons, most importantly, particularly because we have a lot of emerging technologies and there's no single solution, like Wassim said, that will solve all the challenges that we face in the energy industry in particular. But, as we try to use different tools and bring them together in different ways, we have to make sure that there's standards and tools that work together. Otherwise, we won't be able to access that information. We won't be able to use it, and we definitely won't be able to scale. So I think interoperability and scalability are two of the biggest challenges that our industry is facing in implementing digital solutions in general, but especially for digital twin applications. So creating standards and leveraging the tools and solutions that will integrate different applications that we're building. You can think of examples like Bluetooth technology. Without standardization in Bluetooth technology, none of those devices would talk to each other, right? GPS is the same way. There's standard information that streams out of that technology. And because of that, many tools work together. So standardization is what will help us scale and will help us leverage all the emerging technologies that are out there in the marketplace.
Thanks, Shannon. Alan or Justin, any contributions or follow up to Shannon's comments?
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
right.
So, one thing that we've taken an approach for, sorry, Alan. One thing we take an approach for is we're looking at digital twins as kind of a puzzle piece. So you have different suppliers that can help in certain areas. You got people that are really good at simulation. You've got people that are really good at the data integration. You've got really good people in the visualization tier. And so we've worked on partnering with or working with our partners to both build some capability in-house as well as leverage capability that's delivered from other systems as well. So instead of having kind of a black box approach where your data goes into a digital twin and you get the results out, we try and stay connected along all of those pathways. And standardization is key to that. If you don't have standardization, there's no way that those different systems or capabilities could communicate to each other or pass data back and forth from each other or even trigger events from each other. For systems, say, taking something that's in the virtual world and enacting on something in the physical world.
Yeah, I was going to sort of touch
Thanks,
on the collaboration at a sort of a marketplace perspective, so that the way that the marketplace behaves and the supply chain, I think, is important as well. So for us at Neptune, as an independent, we want to inherit from the good work that the likes of Justin's done at BP and yourself at Chevron, Seth. That can the marketplace create an entry point for the smaller players to jump in at? I think that's important. That's a level of collaboration. Then you have that collaboration at kind of at a country level, in the marketplace at a basin level, and there's really good collaboration playing out in Europe, particularly in Norway. We know about in the UK through government initiatives. And then as an industry, how can we collaborate as an industry, particularly with the transition, the energy transition, and the net zero goals we all collectively hold.
Alan, I love that perspective. I think it is really important to highlight collaboration not only between customer and service provider, but also peers within the industry. We talk a lot about standards and the need for standardization, and that only comes from an industry perspective by having some of the peer companies collaborating. And that's a great point. Thank you very much. A related question. So we'll talk a lot today about the need for collaboration, how to effectively collaborate. Justin, I think you brought up a great point regarding some of the buy versus build decisions and discussions that I'm sure a lot of folks on the call are having, and maybe we can get into that in a bit. I wanted to spin the question slightly differently. Is it possible for digital twin technology to actually facilitate or drive effective partnerships? And perhaps we can talk a little bit about that, and not just how do we partner to get digital twin, because I think in meeting some of you last week, there were some interesting perspectives on how having that type of technology actually drives and facilitates partnership. Welcome. I was you at this point, but perhaps one of you might follow up on that thread.
Yeah, so one of the ways that, in BP, that the digital twin effort has facilitated partnerships. One, there's the kind of, I guess, odd look at it where, as soon as we mentioned we were doing something around digital twin, there are, 27 companies coming in saying, we have a digital twin for you. And so it's really looking at, once you're in the digital twin space and you're trying to build these twins, looking at the companies that are coming in, looking at the other partnerships we have already in existence, and seeing what's really the best fit. And some of the partnerships in this area, we came with our idea that we really want to have the digital twin be this puzzle that we put together different pieces from different vendors for. And when we first went down this journey, there weren't a lot of suppliers that wanted to do that. They wanted to have their software as a service solution. They wanted to have their black box capability. And over the course of the last 2 years or so, we've seen suppliers open up a lot and say, well, we understand that we don't have the solution for everything. We can't build something for subsea and for wind farms without having collaboration from the people that we're supplying this for. And so it's really the model that we adopted before bringing partners in has really helped drive some changes that the partners are doing in their own tools. which I think has benefited the industry as a whole. And in talking with some other customers and other companies as well, we've seen similar reaction in that, as they've decided that if there's not one solution to solve all, that collaboration effort and bringing things into that modular approach has really had the vendors and suppliers go along with that. In addition to that, in digital twin just in general, the fact that we're bringing all this data and capability into a central location or a knowledge store, if you will, that's really bred a lot of collaboration outside of just the digital twin area. And now we have different parts of our business and different business units and everything with their own set of partners, their own set of collaborators, all talking to each other on a common forum, which we didn't have previously.
Yeah,
Great comments.
I might add.
Let me first, and we'll get around the table.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, it kind of broke up for me for a moment. Yeah, I totally agree with Justin. I think that there's a lot of really interesting collaborations happening these days, and I think that they're required. I also think that you need to start with defining your value proposition. So depending on what value you're trying to realize, you need to kind of work backward from that, because it becomes really overwhelming. There are so many players in the industry that are offering different solutions. And I think that it becomes so confusing. And that's what we see a lot, that it's almost crippling to get started at times, because there's so many different options and people offering to deploy different solutions. So I think starting from the value proposition is key, and the business goals, and working backward from that, understanding, who you need to work with and what you need to deploy. And also, I think it was Alan that said in our introductory call a couple weeks ago that there are a lot of different types of collaboration. And I think that that's a really interesting thought, that, there are competitors that are starting to collaborate. And this is going back to something that Justin said as well, that, I've never seen collaboration like this. And I think we even need more of it. But seeing competitors collaborate, seeing people along the value chain collaborate, it's a really interesting time. But we also need to make sure that we're keeping our head on straight and starting from the value proposition that we're trying to realize for our organizations.
Yeah, to add to Shannon's message, really, I like that. So if we go back to the definition of digital twin, we know that it's really a system of systems, right? And as a digital twin contractor and system integrators, we realize that we really need to get this data to build this ecosystem from different parties. For instance, like we've been dealing with different partners for commissioning. We get it from Hexagon, from Aviva. We work with them in the engineering phase. Then with virtual flow meter that will be connected to the digital twin solution is from Kongsberg. And also we need like geofencing also from UK. So many partnerships required really these days to build this ecosystem. So the system of system, which is digital twin for the asset. And this is really a great example happened this week that our clients are asking us actually, to share the knowledge and the class libraries and asset information management database that we created for a project, for their project, for owner operator, with our competitor, really so they can use it, to start and to not reinvent the wheel. So I do believe that digital twin will remove all these boundaries and will enhance different type of collaboration between different parties, whether with technology suppliers, owner operators, and also the EPC companies. Thank you.
Thanks, Wassim. Alan, did you want to get in there?
Yeah, actually, it's a different point now. Wassim's kind of triggered it in my mind around the EPCs and the way we interact with our external parties. So, in one sense, when you use a digital environment, you could argue that some of their scope is reducing. They don't have to send so many people offshore. They might not need such a big engineering team in the background doing it old school in documents and drawings. So that has to be recognised, and the EPCs have to be have to be encouraged to collaborate in that environment and be proactively looking to reduce those manually intensive jobs. So that's a kind of new thought. The other one I was going to raise initially is around adaptability. I think needs to come along with collaboration. So again, you can't deploy the same solution uniformly across your portfolio. We've got those hubs I talked about, and then we've got the legacy brownfield. So we have to adapt the twin to suit the maturity and the data maturity of the assets. And that requires adaptability in the marketplace and adaptability in the commercial model that the companies you're working with operate. They can't expect the same level of investment across those legacy brownfield assets. So again, that collaboration just requires that. It's a partnership as well to really work transparently and proactively with the supply chain.
Thanks, Alan. Those are great points, and thanks all for commenting on that thread. Doing my best to mark some of the questions coming in the audience. I'd like to maybe pivot to those, and I thought we might get away from the standards discussion, but there's folks pulling us back into that one. Let me pose one of the questions on standards. There seems to be standards that are focused on the builders of the assets, such as EPC contractors, and others that seem to focus on the sharing of operational data. Do you see a leading standard to enable effective tool integration and operator collaboration emerging? Wassim, I know you've had some experience in this space. You want to lead us off on that one?
Yeah, let me handle this question. So talking about standards, right? We know currently there is like the CIFO standard that we use for asset information management. That's really used as a starting point for development of digital twin. But it's not enough, because it's not completed, and it should be customized to fulfill the needs and the requirement of the owner operator. We are using CIFOs. We used it actually in Aramco and ADNOC projects, really to define the requirements from each phase and from each stakeholder at the design phase, what is really required at the construction phase, and also at operation phase, and by whom, what are the attributes that's required for each equipment, instrument, and line, and also define the philosophy of operation. So standards are there but not completed. We created that to fulfill the gaps. Actually, we created the maturity levels and the data dimensions model that's published in our website that describe the data that can be achieved, and the roadmap and the process to really create these unified operations, also based on the digital thread. So the standard actually is how to capture additional data from different phases of the asset life cycle, and then use it during the operations. So there is really case studies that we published in our virtual booth that will define these type of standards, and also the use cases, how we add on top of the existing standards, really to customize it based on the needs of the clients. Thank you.
Thanks, Wassim. A somewhat related question, and one specifically for Justin from this participant. Did you force the standards or let the partners define them? How do you facilitate the relationships and integration between all the partners? Great question.
So yeah, I'd say I wish we had a silver bullet to this one. We don't, unfortunately. We've had some vendors that are very willing to adopt some standards that we've defined. We've had other vendors that have been less able to. So essentially what we've done is we have a standard interchange internally that we can convert between. So if we have a vendor that we are using for something that we have to use their standard, and it doesn't necessarily match with the other standards from the other systems, which makes it not really a standard, global standard. But in that case, we have APIs and other systems internally that can help convert and change those systems between. And we've been trying to use standards across the industry, CFOS and some other stuff like that. It's just a matter of getting that adoption. And you hit a very valid point, and one that we're battling day to day. Is standardization is great, but everyone has to agree on the same standards to standardize on. Otherwise, it's just groupings of standards.
I'd love to add to Justin's point. I think that in addition to standardization, or as we maybe rather make our way to standardization, I think that more transparency in our data and our data collection efforts would be helpful to the industry. And I think that's one of the challenges is that emerging companies that are deploying first-time digital solutions and implementations of a variety of digital twin applications have a hard time understanding what type of data to be collecting and how to collect it, and then also how to perform different ETL processes to get it back into your existing data sets. And I think one of the challenges is just understanding what type of data is out there, what you should be collecting as an organization, what's going to be useful to making better decisions. So I think that's another way that we can all collaborate across the industry, is to say, here are some of the things that have worked, the lessons learned, the types of data that have provided valuable insights, and then build standards off of that real world information. And then making that data, and I know this is a little bit of a sensitive topic, sharing data isn't always optimal, but different research organizations, including GTI, provide platforms where we can anonymize, aggregate data, and make that information more available so that people need to collect, how different technology providers can build standards, and then how we can move forward on different applications based on those things.
Yeah, I think there's no getting away from that. The data governance and the data quality challenge is just massive. And some of the things we've been working on is, do we have to go that way? Do we have to commit to that, especially on some of the very brownfield contexts? So is there a way to navigate through this that doesn't come with that massive overhead, and be much more tactical in the way you approach it? So it's a non-idealistic way, so a lot of what Justin's talked about is, I would love to be in that position. I would love to be able to build that platform with that governance and those standards. But the reality on the shop floor is that it's probably not relevant for all our contexts. And I think as human beings, we're great at mitigating for things, and we're great at kind of adapting. And where there's been operations in our portfolio for 30, 40, 50 years, people have got used to not having those standards and not having that platform. So trying to move them away from that into a more digital environment it's not a small undertaking. So we're kind of working in parallel. We've got the idealistic route where we want to go through with our standards and the more mature platforms on our hubs, and then we're kind of shadowing that with a much more tactical deployment to brownfield, particularly in the legacy parts of our portfolio, and kind of doing things in a non-idealistic way. For instance, putting a lot more of the contextualization in the client layer. You wouldn't want to do that, but sometimes it's appropriate. And also, being very selective on the data cleansing, only cleansing the data that you require to run a particular model or process simulation, not worry about the rest. Again, you wouldn't want to do that because it doesn't scale very well, but it kind of, sometimes you have to just take those shortcuts, I think.
Just to add to Alan's note there, so we really need to differentiate between the brownfield and greenfield. I totally agree with Alan that the efforts required for a brownfield for an existing facility is totally different from starting, from very early phase when you talk about the greenfield. So, for instance, in one of the Aramco projects, we really started the definition of the standards and the functionalities of digital twin at the field stage. And we start to really push this requirement to all project stakeholders as we move to detailed design, engineering, and construction and operations. That's really a better approach and easier approach, but it only works for a greenfield. While in existing facilities, it's a bit challenging, but there is a process that can be followed. But the structure of the data and then the processes and the FDS, how we can really put all of these together and then structure them again to build the ecosystem that we described is quite challenging. taking in consideration also the emerging technologies that right now is developed in different, like every supplier is following his own. And then you will come also another challenge about the integration. Some of them, they're using API, web-based, or other technologies. So for me, for the new projects, it's really great way to define, like what Aramco did, to define a very early phase, all these standards and requirements, and then collect the data as we move on toward operations. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Great dialogue. And for those keeping at home, about the 32-minute mark where we first heard the word contextualization. So good job there, Alan. Appreciate that. Move on to a slightly different topic, and we will interview questions from the audience. But I want to talk a little bit about how to effectively leverage collaboration and partnership for successful implementation of digital twin. Many companies struggle to progress from proof of concept to larger scale implementations. What tips or strategies can you offer to improve the likelihood of success and gain financial commitments sooner? How can we quickly demonstrate return on investment? And just so you know, I'm asking for a friend on this one. Anyone want to start? Why don't we start with Shannon on that one?
Sure, that'd be great. I think, it's really interesting to think about different ways that we can start to think about how, we go from field applications, how we build out different solutions, and how we deploy them at scale. Because we have to test them, right? We have to test them. We have to start with proof of concept. But scalability is a different factor for different organizations. If you're talking about an organization of the Alan's company size, you might have different scalability issues than if you talk about a Chevron or a BP, especially when you're now talking about the international market. So thinking about how some of these technologies and solutions are deployed in the Permian Basin in West Texas versus, Western Europe. I mean, those are real scalability challenges. So my advice and my tips that I've learned over time is that you do have to start somewhere. You have to start in the pilot phase, but work with scalability as an objective from the start. You have to understand not only how your backend systems will integrate, but how the actual hardware, how the technology in the field can or will be deployed at scale. So it's a real challenge. It has to be designed from the beginning, though. You have to think about it from the start, and you do have to still start with the pilot phase. You have to get those quick wins. You have to demonstrate the value, but plan for scalability from the beginning and think about how to deploy those things as you're implementing the solutions. Because you're also starting to think about, edge processing and how you take the data from different scales of, you're talking about data scalability as well. So not only the hardware, the technology, but also the back-end data infrastructure.
Yeah, I second that a lot. And just making sure that you think of scalability from the beginning, because it's good to tackle the small use cases so that you can have a fast turnaround to get to a solution where you have an ROI. But if you do that every single time, you end up in the state that we were 2 years ago, where we have 20-something digital twins in BP, all custom tailored for each specific solution, all different companies, all different vendors, all different suppliers. And that's not where you want to be. You want to make sure and really grow your investment in that area instead of having one-offs. And so thinking about that scalability, how you're going to scale, when you're going to scale, and with whom you're going to scale from an early stage is really key.
I think just building on that and relating to that is using the word pilot carefully, and also proof of concept even more carefully. So, only do a proof of concept when it's genuinely a concept being proved, and it shouldn't be that many. And I would even go as far as saying don't use the word pilot if it's not a pilot. If you're going straight to operationalize it, then just be open about that, because I think sometimes pilot comes with negative connotations about the short-term nature of that delivery, and it's not going to be operationalized, or it's a take it or leave it offering. But if you're going to use it and it's going to be operational, just don't even use the word pilot if you don't have to. Just say we're just doing this on this asset, and here you go.
Yeah, to add to Alan, I think it's very important that the value and the POCs for digital twin implementation. We start by the existing use cases, right? In the energy sector, there are too many, and also at the same time we need to look at lessons learned of the implementation of others, right? We really should share all of these, the use cases and lessons learned. We've seen many failure in implementing digital twin solutions at the big scale. Probably, as we mentioned earlier, about like lack of standards and the definitions of digital twin and the goals. But at the end, like if we look at the efficiency that we can achieve by implementing digital twin, quick questions: how many times like we ask where to find the information? How many times we don't know, we don't have the access, or we don't know in which system like I can control this specific part of my plant or asset? How many times like we are not able, the information were not available to the right team at the right time? So we always start, when we talk about the value of digital twin, start really to address the current challenges. What are the current challenges? How we can be efficient? How we really make sure that our assets are sustainable, and then later on can be used as a benchmark for energy transition. So these are the values really we need to address. And again, we need to focus on the use cases and to improve them. And the second step is really to learn from the insights and lessons learned from other implementation. Thank you.
Good dialogue. Thanks, everyone. Let me go back to a couple comments or questions that have come in from the audience. The first one is the majority of sites, presumably in our industry, are brownfield. What key activity unlocks the deployment of a digital twin at these locations? And I might ask Alan to start this one off, since Alan, I know your company, you're doing this currently right now within Neptune Energy. Maybe you can comment a little bit on key activity to unlock deployment, for brownfields.
I think firstly, associate it with a specific activity, something recognizable. So that could be a reliability campaign, an integrity campaign, or it could be a project scope. So we're in the Netherlands are repurposing quite a lot of our assets towards carbon capture and storage, and we've got some hydrogen pilots as well. Going back to that pilot word. So yeah, associate it with that activity. It's then implicitly justified, I think, and then people will see it as associated with that change of business, which I think helps with a kind of cultural adoption. If you're just trying to sell it as we're trying to improve your way of working, or it's a general kind of modernization, I think some of the workforce might be, less inclined to adopt. So that's the first point.
That seems to be coming back to Shannon's comment earlier, is let the business use cases facilitate or drive the implementations, right? And how to get to ROI quickly, perhaps.
Yeah, and another thing in our case, I was going to say another thing in our case is sometimes our brownfield assets have an incumbent digital twin in them as well, from some one-off, whether it's a full digital twin or some kind of 3D visualization or other tool or capability. And saying you're going to have a digital twin across your brownfield sites, it's great to say all of our sites will be digital twin enabled by X date, but you really have to look at the use case for it. I mean, does this brownfield need a digital twin? Is it so fixed in its operations that it is running very efficiently now? And just really focus on why you're doing it, not just the fancy shimmer of a new technology being applied to an old asset. It really is, do it for the right reason. Don't do it just because it's in your statement. You know what I mean?
I think that's a great point, actually, Justin. Yeah, one example comes to mind where just on one asset we had 8 different solutions that each part of the business was called a digital twin. And I think one of our subsurface managers was saying we've had a digital twin right from before first gas, over 20 years ago. I was talking about the reservoir model, of course. So it does go back to definitions and what people consider to be digital twins. But I think what we're now talking about is that joined up integrated ecosystem that place to collaborate, that place to implement workflows. I think that's the difference. What we've got to try and communicate to the marketplace, to the user base.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I want to add to Alan's point and Justin, like when we talk about brownfield, right? If we consider the digital twin, the goals and use cases, so mainly you have four, right? Integrity management, you have like the remote monitoring of the assets and the entire operations, you have remote control, what we call it unmanned operations, and the autonomous operations, which is the ultimate goal of many owner operators. And then in these levels, you have different challenges, right, to achieve. If you want like to have like a remote control of an existing asset, right, first challenge that you will face, like the philosophy of operation that is developed, let's say 40, 50 years ago, and then you have many instruments, they are not controlled, you cannot control them. So you need to deploy additional equipment there. And also you need to deploy sensors to retrieve more data. And I think, Justin, you face all of these, right? Especially the aging assets. You don't have enough data really to monitor. You need like for each valve, the pressure and temperature, you need to have like, the positions sensor. There are challenges, but really these challenges are classified based on the use case and the goal that you are trying to achieve. But there are solutions. I'm not saying that challenges are there. There are solutions. The efforts really are different based on what you are trying to achieve in the digital twin.
Yeah, Wassim, you get into a really go ahead, Shannon.
Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so you get into a really odd situation where your edge device is a human with a tablet or a clipboard writing down numbers off of a sensor that you can connect to any kind of external system.
Exactly. And one like a great example also, like in the recent projects, we've seen like really the as-built drawings, right, and the as-built information of the existing assets is not really matching with reality, right? You need to validate all of these, whether by laser scanning or like checking the data there. You do like you take from the historian the tags numbers, and then you compare them with existing PNIDs. They are not the same. So there are challenges in these existing assets. There are modifications that happened like during a period of the asset life cycle. So yeah, I mean there are challenges that can be addressed, and to be grouped by the use case of digital twin implementation.
Yeah, I think I think the theme of over application of technology that we're all kind of discussing here too is a real one, and we see a lot of requests coming in to deploy neural networks and to deploy really advanced solutions. Excuse me, where we don't need to over apply technology. So it does all come back to the value proposition and the use case. And to Justin's point, sometimes, things are working and you don't need to necessarily intervene and change anything just because you have goals to deploy digital solutions. At the same time, we do have a demand for accessing more and more information, and it's real time. I mean, we have that in our personal lives as consumers. We have access to all sorts of information on the spot all the time. So I think we're calling for more of that within our business processes. So that's requiring more data collection. But also, we don't need to over apply technology and over apply, especially the advanced solutions that could distract us from meeting our actual value propositions.
And Shannon, one thing that we've done a little bit to help counteract that, where we do let some areas go with their own solution that they've got, or they're just operating efficiently, so there's no reason to change, is we do have an integration layer essentially that helps abstract some of that. So if there's a site that's doing something their own way and we need that data, or we need to give them data or do that interchange, there's really a layer of abstraction that we've got using some technologies around knowledge graph and other capabilities around that allow us to interchange that data in a common form and common way that we wouldn't have previously using traditional like relational databases and other stores that those systems are used to using.
Just and revisit a topic that you brought up earlier around buy versus build, or maybe buy and build, right? Because I think many companies are pursuing a combination of those two. They're buying certain parts and potentially building certain parts when it comes to deploying, standing up this digital twin ecosystem and deploying solutions. Can you comment on BP's experiences in this space? How do you decide which components to build and which ones to buy? And maybe we can get others' perspective on this as well.
Yeah, you've really touched on, I guess, the crux of the whole problem. There are strong benefits to build. If you build something, you can do whatever you need to in order to get to a solution. You can take just as many or just as few shortcuts as you need to along that path. But then you've got the time of actually having the people, the capability, and the technology to build it. You can, of course, partner with companies to help do that build instead of partnering with companies to supply a solution. And then on the buy side, you have the exact opposite problem. Is you can customize it as much as the vendor or supplier allows you to customize it, but you're really locked into their roadmap and their capability. I wish I could say there's a magic formula to say which is the best one. BP's taken a hybrid approach to building some components, buying some components, and even, like I said before, kind of partnership on the building capability as well. So rather than buying a simple product, we're sometimes building in conjunction with a partner. Like I said, we took that kind of puzzle approach to it. So we look at different solutions, look at the industry trends of what companies do well in certain areas, what things that we inside BP have technology to build ourselves so that we're not having to bring in completely new teams to build it. And then also strategically, what partners and vendors, both from a data standpoint as well as a technology standpoint, are really standing out in the field. And I will say one of the key things, and I can't stress this enough, is the key to success on this is really the data. Make sure you have the data, access to the data. You've got the right people that know and understand the domain and the data that's in that area. I've seen more digital twins built wrong because the supplier or the technology company or the implementation was focused so much on the technology that they didn't actually focus on the data underneath it to say, what is it that this technology is delivering? How is it delivering it? And what are the things that actually make a difference in the industry?
Yeah, can I just pick up on a point there from a smaller company perspective, because it's great to hear Justin talk like that. And then when you think about what that means to the wider marketplace, the decision that the super majors make about build or buy really influences what's available as an entry point for people after that. If the domain knowledge and the data magic is kind of locked within the company and not propagated out to the product and not standardized in the product, then there's no entry point for others to come and jump in there. So it's an interesting one. It's just a reflection on that. And I think certainly from our perspective, we need to continually find ways where we're putting less and less onus on our subject matter experts and our data owners. These are the people who are typically overloaded in the business anyway. To put more pressure on them as data owners to get their data house in order is a real challenge. So we need to find partners who can really help with that process. And that loops back to try and hoping that the marketplace will inherit a best practice through the work with the larger players that can be then fast tracked.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Alan.
Alan, you're specifically making the point that if a larger company or set of companies chooses to take a build approach on something that could have repercussions for smaller companies that may want commercial solution to do that same function.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that solution becomes proprietary, or there's a grey area about the proprietariness of it, if that's a word. So right. you can speak to somebody I've spoken to companies who work with people on this panel, and they can talk about certain things, but then they can't talk about the whole picture. So it really limits them as well. So this is where, as an industry, it's not just about producing standards and mechanisms. It's also about that environment where we can freely collaborate. I know it's a bit naive to think that way, but I think that's kind of where it'd be good to go in that direction.
Yeah.
If I want to add here about like buying or really developing a digital twin, I do believe like there are enough technologies and platforms in the market, right? We don't have a shortage in digital twin platforms. There are too many. Look at the list below, right? But what we really need is like the use cases. We really need innovation. We really need to how really to build something new to be more efficient and sustainable. That's what we are looking for. Probably like there are different strategies for owner operators. Some of them, they want to maintain like the data in-house. They don't want to share the data, which I totally understand that, right? And also there are challenges. Some of them, they don't want to use cloud. So we've seen all of these. But the digital twin, when we talk about the digital twin, building the digital twin, is for me, it's not only the platform, is the use cases, the innovation solutions that we want as an outcome from the digital twin, right? We have enough platforms in the market. We can collaborate with all of these, and that's what we discussed about the collaboration and partnership. So it's more for us. It's more about the development of the value proposition of the digital twin solutions. Thank you.
So we have a 5 minutes. I wanted to give an opportunity for each panelist with a parting thought or key takeaway. I have one last question though from the audience before we do that, and I'm going to give Alan and Justin a chance to quickly answer this one, and I think you'll understand why when you hear it. The question is, what does the panel think about providing public data on existing fields to accelerate third-party solutions and data integrations? And so Alan and Justin, you both work for companies that are currently operating brownfield assets. Can you comment at all on willingness within your organizations to maybe go that route? Alan, to your point, perhaps for the betterment of the industry.
Yeah, so I guess I'll take a first stab at that, and then Alan, I'll pass to you. Traditionally, it's been difficult to publicize data. So if you look at operations, there's a lot of proprietary information around the data and the site, et cetera. We do at BP very much think that there are standards and capabilities and information that can be shared out, especially when you're looking at benefiting the industry. As an example, if you're looking at simulation models or AI models, there's a difference between sharing out a model that has been trained on public or private information versus sharing out the raw private information. And so that's one area that we've looked at before is, let's take some of the insights that we've grown over years and the data that we've used to train a particular AI or ML model, and then be able to share the model out that other companies can then, help train on and help build that model as well. Then we're not restricted with actually sharing out the private information, the private data, or the private information about how that field operates, but we are sharing out the resultant set of what we use to train that model. And so that's something that we've looked at in the past. And then of course there are some areas where we're operating in government areas or joint ventures with government entities and stuff like that. And so there's a level of publicity to that data anyway. So that's another aspect. Then there are, of course, if you're looking at data that can be used to help like build models that may not be current data, but look at historic data, there are some assets or sites that we've decommissioned or shut down over time that we may be able to share information out from on that as well. Alan, over to you.
Yeah, I think if we had the opportunity to tap into raw data from other players, to be honest, I think we've already got enough on our plate to not go there. What we want is the outcomes, exactly what you said, Justin. It's the failure cases when you're looking at equipment reliability. It's those kind of the outcomes of somebody else's analysis that will then fast track your machine to be in the same, to have the same heritage. So yeah, outcomes first. And I think you're right. There's more and more collaboration happening anyway. And if we think about things like energy transition and new energy, we're going to have new operating models. We're going to have, parallel operations, normal, traditional production versus carbon storage versus hydrogen injection. I think so. We're going to have to collaborate in that space anyway, because we're going to be working in partnerships, in different partnerships. So I think we're going to have to do more, but I think it is starting.
Great.
Yeah, true.
Well, I wish we had more hours to be able to dive into the topics. Certainly the topic of energy transition is one I was hoping to get to in the context of digital twin. Unfortunately, we didn't have time, but really a great discussion. Thank you, all of you, for your participation today. I'd like to give you each, well, let's see, I'm looking at the time. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. Let me just say, Shannon, Alan, Justin, Wassim, thank you very much today, all your insight and dialogue. Thanks for some really great questions. And I hope to see you in a future panel discussion here at Future Digital Twin. Thanks, everyone.